there, I'm Jess, and today we're going to be making one of our best-selling patterns. We're going to be sewing a classic bucket style bag that is a great addition to your handmade bag assortment. First of all, welcome to the Sallie Tomato YouTube channel. I'm so glad that you found our tutorials. And if you're new to sewing or like sewing fashion-forward bags, our YouTube channel is the place to be to create confidently. Today, I'm going to show you how to make the Magnolia bucket bag pattern, which was one of the first patterns that I designed for my business. And this tutorial is a long time coming, so I'm very excited to show you how to make this bag. The modern style of this bucket bag design stems back to the 1930s and has been a mainstay across fashion ever since. With this project, you'll learn about grommets, tassels, and become comfortable working with non-woven fabrics. The Magnolia bag is secured with a drawstring closure and magnetic snap. The strap is easily adjustable with a slider buckle. After you make the Magnolia bag, this pattern pairs well with a few of our wallet patterns, including the Bella zip-around wallet and the Lucky Penny wallet. The patterns can be found on our website, sallietomato.com, or at your local Sallie Tomato retailer. This bag can be made to fit your own personal style by using a variety of fabrics and accents. The finished size is 9.5 inches wide, 12 inches high, and 5.5 inches deep. In this tutorial, you'll learn how to make a key fob that gets inserted into the lining, add a magnetic snap closure, create an adjustable strap, stabilize the base, add a drawstring, create tassels, and see the entire construction of the bag from start to finish. Before we get started, be sure to grab a pattern, see the description below this video, and follow the link to access the pattern information. I encourage you to use our retailer locator on our website to find a Sallie Tomato retailer near you. All of the supplies you need are listed on the back of the pattern. So once you decide on your fabrics, gather all of the supplies that you need and cut out your pieces according to the pattern. Once you're ready, let's begin. I always like to begin by reviewing all of the pieces that you'll need for this project. Your main fabric will be your non-woven fabric, either faux leather, cork, micro suede, or any other fabric that will not fray when the edges are cut. Your main fabric will be used for the exterior top, which is piece A, the exterior bottom, piece C, the exterior base, the adjustable straps, the drawstring closure, key fob, the drawstring adjuster, the tassels, the snap accents, the strap connectors, and the tassel tabs. The exterior middle panel will be cut from your contrast fabric. I decided to use a faux leather for my exterior middle panel. However, if you choose to use a lighter weight material, then you'll want to cut the mid-weight interfacing suggested in the pattern. This will add some structure to the center. You'll also need a material for the lining. I chose to use Sallie Tomato Turtle Tex, which is a coated cotton that's designed specifically for bag linings because it's water resistant and durable. You could certainly use any cotton, canvas, or preferred lining material. You'll also need a piece of fleece for the interior and the facing support, as well as a heavy stabilizer such as Craft Tex or Tim Tex, which will help add stability to the interior base. There are several pieces included with this pattern, so it may be helpful to label your pieces as you cut them to keep everything organized. You can download and print the free piece labels sheet to have your own set of reusable labels that you can clip onto each of your pieces. You'll also need to gather some hardware for your project. We do have a complete set of hardware to create the Magnolia bucket bag available in 5 different metal finishes. However, you can purchase the pieces a la carte if you already have hardware on hand. So you will need a total of 12 grommets that are 1/2 inch in diameter in the center of the grommet, which have an inner dimension of a 1/2 inch diameter. You'll also need 2 1-inch swivel hooks and a 1-inch slider buckle, along with 2 1-inch D-rings. These will be used to create the strap connectors and the adjustable crossbody strap. You'll also need a 1/2 inch swivel hook. This will be used for the key fob that is inside the bucket bag, which is a unique feature to this pattern. And there are optional bag feet. You'll need a set of 4. And finally, you will need a 9-inch zipper for this project. We recommend Sallie Tomato zipper by the yard, which have a nylon coil so you can cut and sew through the zipper teeth. And you'll also need a 1/2 inch magnetic snap. Now we'll fuse the interfacing to the coordinating pieces. The interfacing section is optional depending on the type of fabrics you chose to use for your project. Since I'm using Sallie Tomato Turtle Text for my lining, it already has a coated side which acts as interfacing. So this material already has some nice structure to it that I'm going to skip adding any interfacing to my interior facing piece. However, if you are using a woven cotton or canvas, you'll want to center and fuse the interfacing to the wrong side of piece N according to the manufacturer's instructions. If you'd like to add additional stability to your base piece D out of your main fabric, you can center and fuse interfacing to the wrong side of piece D. And finally, depending on the type of material you chose to use for your center panel, you'll want to center and fuse the mid-weight interfacing to the wrong side of piece B. I'm going to skip adding the interfacing since I'm using faux leather for my project. Next, prepare the base. Center the stabilizer piece O on the wrong side of main fabric piece D. You can hold the stabilizer in place with basting tape, spray, glue, or sew-tight magnets. You'll notice that the stabilizer piece O is cut smaller than the base, and that is so the stabilizer doesn't get sewn into the seam allowance in a later step. Then over at the sewing machine, top stitch 3/8 of an inch from the stabilizer edge. The firmness of the stabilizer will help prevent the bottom of your bag from sagging over time. Next, if you'd like to install the optional bag feet, you'll want to transfer the placement marks for each of the bag feet according to the pattern. I like to use the Sallie Tomato rotary punch to cut a small hole at each placement mark and install one bag foot at each placement mark according to the manufacturer's instructions. Bag feet are very easy to install and only take a few minutes to add to your project. If you'd like a step-by-step video tutorial on how to install this hardware, visit our YouTube channel. After installing any hardware, it's a good idea to add a drop of permanent glue as well as fuse a scrap of interfacing over each of the hardware pieces to protect your lining from getting scuffed by the hardware. Next, we'll prepare the snap closure. Install 1/2 of the magnetic snap on the right side of one main fabric piece J snap accent. I've already went ahead and marked the placement indicated on the pattern piece. You'll want to center the washer over the placement mark and mark each of the slits that the prongs will poke through. Cut each of the slits and make sure that the prongs are to the wrong side. Refer to the hardware manufacturer's instructions for installing this hardware. Otherwise, visit our YouTube channel for a detailed step-by-step tutorial. Then install the remaining half of the magnetic snap on the right side of the second piece J. Again, it's a good idea to add a drop of permanent glue to help secure the hardware. Then, with wrong sides together, pair one piece J with a snap to a piece J without a snap and align all edges. Use sewing clips to hold the pieces together. Then top stitch the sides and the bottom curve with an 1/8 inch seam allowance. Repeat the same steps using the remaining pieces J. As you sew around the curved edge, stop with the needle in the down position, lift the presser foot, and pivot to sew around the curved edge. The next step is to assemble the exterior. With right sides together, align the long top edges of main piece A, exterior top, and contrast piece B, which is your exterior middle. Sew the long edge with 3/8 inch seam allowance. Then, using a seam roller, press the seam open. I absolutely love my seam roller from Modern American Vintage. It glides so smoothly, and its durable design allows for an even press. Although the non-woven fabric will want to bounce back into place, by using a seam roller, the fabric will be more relaxed to prepare for top stitching. And top stitch a 1/4 inch from both sides of the seam. As you top stitch your fabric, you'll want to make sure that the seam allowance is flat and pressed open underneath your fabric. And in case you're wondering, I'm sewing on the Bernette 08 straight stitch machine. This is a domestic machine, but it is as powerful as an industrial machine. It sews so smoothly through the multiple layers of fabric. I absolutely love it, and if you're a bag maker, I highly recommend checking out this machine. There are several great features, including an automatic needle threader, LED lights that illuminate the bed of the sewing machine, a bobbin winding feature, a bobbin thread cutter, and adjustable speed. If you want to learn more about this machine, we've added a link with all of the information down below. Repeat the same steps to attach main fabric piece C, which is your exterior bottom, to the bottom long edge of piece B. Next, fold the assembled exterior in half to mark the top center. Center one snap accent over the mark with the hardware against the right side of the exterior, and make sure to align the top straight edges. Then baste along the top edge of the snap accent with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Next, we'll prepare and attach the strap connectors. On the wrong side of each piece K, which are your strap connector pieces, you'll want to mark according to the pattern. You'll measure in from each long edge and make a mark, and then you'll measure down from each short edge and make a mark. Then you'll connect each of the adjacent marks to create a diagonal line. After marking, cut along each of the lines to create tapered ends. Tapering the top end of each of the strap connectors will help reduce bulk and later conceal the raw end of the connector for a neat professional finish. Next, thread each angled top end through one D-ring and fold the top end 1 inch to the wrong side. Hold the fold in place with a sewing clip. Next, position one strap connector in from the left side edge of the exterior according to the pattern. You'll want to align the bottom raw edges so the D-ring is towards the top. Use double-sided basting tape against the wrong side of the connector to hold in place, or you can add washi tape, which can be sewn through and torn away after sewing. Then top stitch one long edge of the strap connector with an 1/8 inch seam allowance, stopping about a 1/2 inch from the hardware. Then lift your presser foot, pivot, and stitch across the connector. Then pivot and continue top stitching with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance down the opposite long edge of the connector. Then repeat the same steps for the remaining connector and the right edge of the exterior. I highly recommend using a zipper foot, an edge stitch foot, or very narrow foot to help stitch evenly and closely to the strap connector edges. Next, we'll complete the exterior. With right sides together, fold the exterior in half, aligning the raw edges and matching the pieced seams. Sew together with 3/8 inch seam allowance. Press the seam open with your seam roller, and if your machine allows, you can top stitch a 1/4 inch from each side of the seam for added detail. This will also help the seam allowance lay flat. You may find it easier to top stitch the seam with the wrong side facing out. Just remember to stitch slowly and take your time. Next, turn the exterior right side out. Next, center the remaining strap accent over the completed center back seam. Make sure that the hardware is against the right side of the exterior and the top raw edges are even. Baste along the top edge of the tab with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Then turn the exterior wrong side out. I've already went ahead and transferred the center marks on the base pattern piece to the wrong side of the exterior base. Next, we'll mark the front and side center marks along the bottom edge of the exterior. The seam in the pieced exterior is the center back. So to find the front center, simply fold the project in half and mark the center. Then fold in half in the opposite direction, matching the center marks to find the remaining centers along the sides. Then, with right sides together, align the center and side marks on piece D with the coordinating marks on the bottom edge of the exterior. Make sure that the short edges of the base are matched with the connectors of the exterior, and the long edges of the base are matched with the front and back center of the exterior. Use lots of sewing clips to help hold the aligned edges together. And to further help relax the exterior bottom edge along the curves, you can take a scissors and cut small snips into the seam allowance no more than 1/4 inch deep. Next, sew around the base with 3/8 inch seam allowance. I find it easiest to sew this step with the base against the bed of the sewing machine, and make sure to stop with your needle down to readjust as needed. After sewing, leave the exterior wrong side out, and if needed, make additional small snips along the curved seam to help the fabric relax and lay flat in place. Next, we'll prepare the lining. Thread one end of piece G key fob through 1/2 inch swivel hook. Fold the key fob in half so the wrong sides are together, and align the short raw ends. Then top stitch an 1/8 inch from one long raw edge. Pivot and sew across the key fob about 1/2 inch from the hardware. Then pivot and sew an 1/8 inch down the remaining long edge. Next, with right sides up, position the key fob in from the left short side edge of the lining piece M, which is the interior. Refer to the pattern and align the top edges. The key fob will extend past the bottom edge of the lining. You can add a sewing clip to hold the key fob in place. Then, with right sides together, center and align one long edge of main fabric piece N, which is the facing, along the top edge of the lining piece. Sew the top long edges together with 3/8 inch seam allowance. After sewing, press the seam away from the facing and top stitch on the right side of the interior 1/4 inch from the seam. Next, center and fuse fleece piece Q interior to the wrong side of the coordinating lining facing panel. If you're using sew-in fleece, you can baste along all outer raw edges with 1/4 inch seam allowance. The next section is to add the interior zipper pocket. Follow along with the instructions to learn how to add the interior zipper pocket to the lining of your bag. If you've worked with any of our patterns before, you'll notice that the steps are the same as our other patterns. However, the dimensions of the zipper pocket pieces and the measurements may differ. If you'd like to watch a video tutorial on how to install an interior zipper pocket, we've added a link in the description below. And as you watch the video tutorial, just make sure to refer to the Magnolia Pattern instructions for the specific dimensions and measurements. It's very important that the bottom edge of the zipper pocket lining is left unsewn, and you unzip the zipper completely after installing the pocket. The bottom unsewn edge will be used to turn the bag right side out later on. Next, we'll assemble the interior. Fold the interior in half with right sides together, aligning the side edges. Begin sewing at the top edge with a 1/2 inch seam allowance until the seam of the facing. Then gradually increase to 3/4 inch seam allowance by angling the raw edge of your fabric to align with the 3/4 inch mark on your needle plate. After sewing, trim the seam allowance to 1/4 inch wide. Using a wider seam allowance for the interior will make it slightly smaller, and it will fit neatly inside your bag. Referring to the pattern, repeat steps 3 through 5 under Complete the Exterior on page 3 to attach the interior and the interior base. Using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. After sewing, trim the seam allowance to a 1/4 inch wide. Then turn the interior right side out. Next, mark the center front and sides along the top edge of the exterior and interior. Remember that the seam is the center back on both pieces. Check that the zipper pocket is unzipped and the D-rings and snap accents are tucked down inside the bag. Then, with right sides together, place the interior inside the exterior, aligning the top edges and center marks. Sew the pieces together with 3/8 inch seam allowance. Turn the bag right side out through the open, unsewn edge of the zipper pocket. Smooth and shape the exterior. You can use your fingers to help roll the seams. Then top stitch the bottom edge of the pocket closed with an 1/8 inch seam allowance. Smooth the interior down into the bag. Use your fingers to roll the top seam edge even. Then top stitch a 1/4 inch from the top seamed edge. Make sure to keep the snap accents out of the stitching. This section of the pattern is definitely the most intimidating one. However, I assure you that it doesn't need to be. I know you have a chic, beautiful bag, and you may be worried to cut the holes for the grommets and install them in your finished project. However, take your time marking the placement for each of the grommets and you'll be just fine. On the right side of the exterior back, mark a horizontal line 1.25 inches down from the top edge using a removable pen or chalk. Then measure and mark 3/4 inch in from each side of each strap connector along the horizontal line. Then measure and mark 2 inches in from each previous mark twice for a total of 6 marks on the front and 6 marks on the back. There should be an approximate 2.5 inch space between the placement marks at the center back and front. Next, we'll install one grommet centered at each placement mark through all of the layers. So let's start with one grommet. You'll want to unscrew the back plate from the grommet and use the back plate as your template to mark the hole for the grommet. First, I trace the inner circle of the back plate. Then I mark each of the screw holes. Then you'll want to draw an oval shape connecting each of the screw holes around that inner circle mark. You'll want the oval to be about 1/8 of an inch from the inner circle edge and continue around each of the screw hole marks. This is because when we cut the hole, you'll want to make sure that the raw edges of the fabric are concealed inside the grommet. You don't want any raw edges poking through and showing through that center of the grommet. So that's why we need about 1/8 inch past that center circle mark. Next, we'll cut out the oval shape. I like to use my rotary punch on the largest setting to punch out each of the screw holes. Then take your scissors and continue cutting out the rest of the oval shape. It's better to cut a little bit smaller because you can always cut away more if needed. Then test to make sure that the front and back of your grommet fit over the oval cutout area. If you need to trim any extra fabric away, feel free to do so. Once you're satisfied with the cutout area, then screw together the front and back plate of the grommet. Then you'll continue working around the rest of the bag, installing one grommet at a time until each of your grommets are installed. Next, we'll create a drawstring with tassels. Join the main fabric pieces F for the drawstring by placing the short ends right sides together perpendicular to each other, overlapping the ends by about 1/4 of an inch. Sew at a diagonal seam from the inner corner to the opposite inner corner. After sewing, trim the excess seam allowance to 1/4 inch wide. Use your seam roller to press the seam open, then top stitch 1/8 inch from each side of the seam. Trim the drawstring to measure 32 inches long. Then, with wrong sides together, fold the drawstring in half lengthwise. Top stitch 1/8 inch from each length side. Then trim all of the extra thread tails and the extra seam allowance at the join. Next, with right sides together, fold main fabric piece H drawstring adjuster in half, aligning the short raw edges. Make sure that the top and bottom edges are even as well, and then sew along the short ends with 3/8 inch seam allowance. Finger press the seam open and then turn the adjuster right side out. Center the seam to the back and top stitch either 1/8 inch or 1/4 inch from each side of the seam. Next, we're going to thread the drawstring through the bag. Start by threading the drawstring through one of the middle grommets at the exterior front. Then weave the same end of the drawstring through all of the grommets, alternating from the inside to the outside of the bag. The drawstring end should come out through the adjacent middle grommet at the front. I like to keep the folded edge of the drawstring towards the top edge of the bag and make sure that your drawstring doesn't get twisted as you weave it through each of the grommets. Then thread each drawstring end through a channel of the drawstring adjuster. I like to use my stiletto to help push each of the drawstring ends through the channels. I've already went ahead and prepared each of my tassel pieces. You'll want to start by marking a horizontal line down from the top edge according to the pattern. Then cut vertical lines spaced about 1/4 of an inch apart from the bottom edge up to the marked line all the way across each of the tassel pieces. You can certainly cut narrower fringe if you prefer finer fringe for your bag. Then use permanent glue or hot glue to wrap and glue the tassel to each of the drawstring ends. You'll want to wrap and glue the tassel as tight as possible. Then to finish off your tassel, apply glue to one main fabric piece L, which is the tassel tab, and wrap around the top of the completed tassel with the raw ends to the back. The final section of the instructions is to create the adjustable strap. Follow along with your pattern to create the adjustable strap. Otherwise, we've added a link in the description below to a step-by-step video tutorial if you'd like to follow along in a video. The instructions in this pattern are similar to other Sallie Tomato patterns, so the process may be familiar to you already. After your strap is complete, you can attach each of the swivel hooks to the D-rings on the side strap connectors, and your chic new bag is complete.
Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed learning how to make the updated version of the Magnolia bucket bag. If you have any other questions or suggestions for this pattern, let us know in the comments below. Please share and show off your photos of your completed bag. We would love to see your style and what memories you make with the Magnolia bag. Use the hashtag Sallie Tomato and hashtag Magnolia bag on social media. And if you liked this video, give it a thumbs up and make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss out on any future videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.